we're going to be talking about Tankxiety, which is basically kind of the pressure people feel when they tank in MMOs. A lot of that kind of comes from basically the expectations we put on tanks, I think, where in a lot of games the tank is kind of the default leader of the group. They kind of set the pace for the most part. And the tank is the person basically has to run in front because they're the one that should be grabbing aggro, running into monsters first and grabbing aggro and all that. So for a lot of people, this is kind of anxiety inducing because they kind of feel like, well, what if I don't do a good enough job, or what if I'm not good enough?
What if I do my pools wrong?
Right. What if I'm not going fast enough? What if I'm going too fast for the other people to keep up? That type of thing. And I like, as we were kind of talking about this, I kind of identified that this kind of fits into a larger discussion that we've had in the past for MMO development, talking about themes about solo versus group content.
Yeah, I think we've covered it before in the past. I think we talked about it in the... It was one of our versus topics. It was like...
Right.
I don't remember. It was like a subcategory.
Yeah. And I mean, like, my personal opinion as both a player and developers, I like there to be group content, but but the trend has been going toward more solo content for a long time, which I mean, there's kind of pros and cons to each kind of type of thing. Talking about the pros and cons of group content versus solo content. So I mean, a lot of it kind of comes down to for the player about their personal preferences. And I think there's some reasons why, in kind of the context of some of the other topics we've discussed in the past, why this is important, like why this matters. So
yeah, like I think one of the reasons why they're leaning more towards like single player content in MMOs is because they're trying to make that, because MMOs have become unfavorable in the decline of World of Warcraft, that they're like, well, maybe we can provide other experiences within the MMO as well.
Well, I think maybe kind of the interesting thing to do here would be to kind of look back a little bit at kind of the history of this type of thing, because like World of Warcraft was one of the first games to really have of kind of the graphical MMOs to have that focus on solo. If you go back to text mods, especially the first text mods, they were mostly solo and competitive. There was very little way for people to really cooperate, and there was even kind of the game kind of set up for them to be very competitive, where there was open PvP, what we used to call PK, player killing back in the day. And so like other players were kind of a danger, to be honest, because your character was a walking bag of experience, just like all the monsters around there. And especially in like the original mud and like a lot of the early muds, they had permadeath. Like if somebody came up and if you had like 10% of your hit points left after a fight, and somebody came on to you full strength, they would engage you in a fight, and like running away basically cost you experience points. So it was one way or another you were kind of losing out if you kind of met another player and they decided to go hostile towards you. I think like you could almost kind of compare it to like a lot of the modern games like Rust and whatnot, where maybe if you go in with some friends, maybe like the dynamic will be a little different, assuming your friends don't stab you in the back for shits and giggles, but like Malgrim would.
You're right.
That's right.
I wouldn't stab you. I just handcuff you outside the door and feed you to the wolves.
Right. You wouldn't even get anything out of it. You would just be an asshole for the sake of it.
I get entertainment.
You get that warm, fuzzy glow, fuzzy feeling. Yeah, and so like, and a lot of early MMOs kind of mirrored MUDs with kind of that basic kind of focus on solo activity. Like Meridian 59 didn't have a party system. There was no way, like there was mechanics. So if you were beating up the same monster as someone else, you would, like you could basically share some of the advancement potential.
Mm-hmm.
But like like a lot of the skills were advanced on use base, and so you know if hitting a monster took 20 hits alone and 10 hits with a group, you weren't advancing any faster. Actually, like you were kind of like a little less efficient because you had to go find the next you had to walk to the next monster in order to get those 20 those 20 swings of your weapon to get the 20 chances of advancing your weapon skill. It actually went slower. um, Originally in the game, like we added something which kind of backfired in a way, which is kind of hilarious. But we added it so that monsters would spawn faster if there's multiple people in as a way to kind of encourage people to actually like be in the same zone with each other and not run away when somebody showed up, or for someone not to go, oh, guess they're like, oh, there's nobody here, so, or there's a person here, so they're camping all the good stuff, so I'm not gonna have a chance. But it kind of turned into a way where people adjust their expectations so that the spawn rate with multiple people became the new norm, and they felt that if they were alone in the game, even though in theory it was basically like it was intended to be exactly the same spawn rate as the game originally had, they felt that was too slow, and so they like a lot of times people would log on alt characters, spawn mules they call them, to just stand around in a zone to basically increase spawn rate.
Oh my goodness.
Right. And so, but like there was no way. But like I said, there's no party system. So like you were literally competing directly against people, for things. And most people played it solo. Is when like specifically played the PVE content solo. When it got to PvP, that's when the group stuff came in, and basically most people kind of formed around the guild concept.
Mm-hmm.
But the guilds really didn't have any gameplay effect. They were like the big thing for that was basically just being able to see friendly people on the map after we added it, and then also having kind of a fairly secure chat channel where you know exactly who was listening and who wasn't.
Spies.
Oh yeah, oh my, spies were a big thing. Because yeah, like information was a weapon. If you could basically get the drop on people, that was basically that was a kind of a bigger thing for you. And so yeah, and so like Ultima Online was very much the same way. Like you had the like you had chat, like you couldn't even chat with people at a distance. You basically, and they had like I think they were called guild stones, which is basically like, was a guild, but I don't think there was a whole lot that went on with that. It was basically like the people in your area were kind of like the people you could talk to, and it was basically the same thing, like where there's a lot of competition for who could who's going to farm the monsters.
Oh, Ultima's free now?
Yeah, it's free to play. I think I don't know what the restriction is, but yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly enough, it's a very old game, and people aren't willing to pay subscription just to check it out. But I think, but so looking back in history again, I think like EverQuest, the original EverQuest, kind of set the standard for group-based content, where most of the content was kind of is expected that you would be in a group, breaking up spawns and pulling monsters and and burning them down. And this was vaguely based on a Dikuma, as most people know by this point. And so like and I don't remember if that game had like they might have had party structure or something like that. I'm not entirely certain what what the kind of the development lineage is for like a lot of the EverQuest systems.
I don't know. I never got into EverQuest. I tried
Right.
EverQuest 2 for like 3 days and then went,
Yeah, EverQuest. Yeah, we can get to EverQuest too in a bit. But yeah, but like one of the things that a lot of people talked about in EverQuest was kind of this concept of forced grouping. Like oh, I have to go and find a group in order to go and camp the dungeon to break the spawn. And there was some exceptions to that. Like some people with certain classes could be, a druid was on the big ones. I think necromancer was the other one, where you could basically like run. You could run faster than an enemy, and you could basically put instacat dots on them, and so you would just basically kite. Call it, this is where the original concept of kiting came from in MMOs. You would basically just kite a monster around, slowly doing damage to it with your damage over time spells, or your spells as they if you had any instant cast spells, the spells as they kind of came available. And it was it was slow but steady, and some people liked it because they were able to advance on their own. But for most people, like they have this kind of concept of forced grouping, like oh, I'm forced to be in this group, and it kind of chafes some people because sometimes you get in a really great, if you're in a really great group, everything's fine. But if you get in this terrible group, or someone keeps on AFKing, or the healer just can't keep up, or somebody doesn't have very good gear, or whatever, it can be very frustrating. And so, kind of with World of Warcraft, there's a shift back to the single player focus, where you had like the base game was was basically mostly about going to quest hubs, vacuuming up quests, going to do things that were basically fairly solo friendly, and then going back and turning it in. That was the main way you advanced your character. Where in EverQuest, you had to be part of a group. You had to go and camp spawns in order to advance your character.
Yeah, WoW would have like the occasional like group quest.
Right, but it was like flagged as very obviously like this, and they had the grouped dungeons, but those were instanced, and so you basically had to kind of do a very specific party composition in order to go do the dungeons, and eventually they put in the party finder so that or the dungeon finder or whatever, to allow you basically to kind of easily group up with other people. I still remember when if you had
looking for
four
group
people.
chat.
Yeah, looking for group chat, or basically even just kind of standing someplace and waiting for other people to show up at the dungeon entrance.
And then they added the summoning stones.
Right, the summoning stones, were kind of like a big thing. So then you could basically just kind of like grab, add people to the party and grab them and whatnot.
And the warlocks.
Right, and but like, the group content was basically very separated from kind of the main content. You could literally get up to max level, just doing quests, and never, basically never having to do group content. A lot of people played that way. Like, like the two major ways to play the game were basically either, once you got to max level, was either to start doing group content, which is dungeons and raids and all that stuff to to gear up to do the next dungeon or raid or whatever, or you basically went back and basically soloed up another alt. Those were kind of the two main paths to for entertainment in World of Warcraft.
But reputation grinding.
Oh God! Don't even. I'm gonna hide under my desk now.
But I gotta get my rep up with the Booty Bay.
But the other thing, kind of talking about EverQuest 2 was kind of interesting, was that EverQuest 2 was basically kind of supposed to be very EverQuest in its kind of behavior. But then but then World of Warcraft launch, had this great single player focus, and they basically kind of went back and kind of nudged EverQuest 2 along that path a little bit more to be a little more solo friendly. I don't know when you tried it out, but if you tried it out very early in it, there was a lot more of a kind of a group focus to it.
Oh no!
Whereas if you tried out,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but if you tried it out later, then it was much more solo focused because mostly because influence of WoW.
I think it was like 2010, 2012.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like after
super late.
It was
right.
After SOE did their whole free games market push.
Right.
I think it was around the time Free Realms came out that I tried it, EverQuest 2 out.
Right.
And it was awful.
Right. But yeah, so I mean, and I think EverQuest 2, I don't think it was quite designed as well as World of Warcraft was for making kind of that single player journey up to max level happen. But like one of the things that a lot of kind of game developers talked about back in the day was that like before computers, games were essentially almost exclusively multiplayer. You look at checkers or chess or whatnot. Like these games required another player. Um, when computer games came along, they kind of removed the need for the other player. You could play chess or checkers against the computer. You could play solitaire games. Solitaire games before the computer were kind of seen as like an aberration or something you did to pass the time. They weren't real games. And so basically, computer games kind of put that back, and then online multiplayer kind of brought it back to kind of the multiplayer aspect of it. When we look at a lot of the early games, and like especially like when EverQuest was ascended, a lot of games during that era, basically there was a lot of focus on group activity, PVE for EverQuest, but for PvP was kind of a group activity in Meridian 59 for a while.